What's up, everyone? My name is Isaiah Newsom, and this is the ZayNews Podcast, where we talk about all things basketball, whether it's the NBA, college hoops, youth sports, you name it. If it's about basketball, then we talk about it here. If you like the content, make sure to like, subscribe, tell a friend to tell a friend, leave a comment, engage with the community that we're trying to build here. Ask me questions. Let me know if my take is trash. Whatever it is, it's all welcome. I want to hear your opinions. I want to debate your opinions. I want to have stuff to talk about in these episodes that are coming from other people, and I really want to hash these things out. So without further ado, let's get into it. And look no farther. Obviously, as we all know, the NBA Finals just wrapped up Game 7 between the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Indiana Pacers. The Oklahoma City Thunder won the NBA championship, right? We should all give our round of applause to those guys because they had a tremendous season, won 68 games, handled business in the playoffs, and did what a lot of people thought that they couldn't do, right? Being a young team, being unproven, they went out there, they won the championship. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of people who criticize, especially as just how unceremoniously the game ended with the best player on the other end getting injured early in the game, and we get it, but those are just the dices that were rolled, right? That's the hand that was played to the Oklahoma City Thunder, to no fault of their own. They went out there, they handled business, and dare I say, they were the favorites going in. They were picked by a lot of people to win the series. I think on paper they were the more talented team, and they did what they were supposed to do. There's no guarantee that Indiana would have won Game 7 if Tyrese would have stayed on the floor anyway. So I think first things first, where we got to start out today is just giving Oklahoma City the credit that they deserve. They went out there as the second youngest team ever, outside of like the 1977 Blazers, won themselves a championship, the first in franchise history since moving over to Oklahoma City. Kudos to those guys, man. That's a huge, huge, huge accomplishment that deserves a lot of credit. And they played their butts off all playoffs. They battled with some tough teams. They had to go up against the best player in the world in Joker. They got him out of there in 7. They cleaned out the Minnesota Timberwolves. No point in mentioning the Memphis series. They handled business in that series as well. And then they went up against a real championship contender in the Pacers, right? And I don't think we can discourage them one bit, because I'm not sure if another team came out of the West, they would have been able to get past the Pacers. You know what I'm saying? With the way the Pacers play, their depth, the way that they can hurt you in so many different ways, I'm not confident there was another team in the West that could have gotten past that Pacers team. So give them boys a pat on the back. They deserve it. Shea had a tremendous season, right? MVP, Finals MVP, West Coast MVP, one of the best scorers in the game, scoring title this season, right? Like, just, a elusive scorer, guy who can, put points on the board in a flash, makes the right play, just a tremendous talent. And that team has a very bright future. There was a lot of, talk about how over the past 7 years, I think there hasn't been a back-to-back NBA champion, and how the league is shifting more to parity, like there's just a lot more parity in the league. Over the past couple of years. Each year it's a new team winning it. And I think there's something to be said for that. But if there's one team that can, sustain a high level of greatness, be kind of a dynasty in this era, it has to be the Oklahoma City Thunder. At least right now it's presently constructed. Now, who knows? The Spurs can go out and get Giannis tomorrow and we'd be like, now what? You know what I'm saying? Like, things can change in an instant in the NBA. But in terms of, roster configuration, salaries, they still got guys locked in over the next couple of years in rookie deals. They're in a really good spot. And not to mention the draft capital that they still have, all the assets that they still have on paper that they can move around and make adjustments with to make sure that their salary doesn't get too high and they don't start to really struggle in that regard. So, man, when you're talking about the Oklahoma City Thunder, I think it's nothing but positives today, right? You went out there as the youngest team in the league, second youngest team ever, get yourselves a championship, played at a very high level throughout the finals, and then you wind up in an even better place now because your team's still young and you guys just have still such a bright future ahead of you. I'm interested to see what Oklahoma City's able to do over the next 4 to 5 years, because I think it's going to be a pretty special run. Now, do I think they're going to just rally off 5 championships in a row or something? No, but I think they're a team that, they can be in the hunt every year over the next 5 years. I think, as long as there's not some crazy, out of unforeseen circumstance that we can't see yet that happens, I think they're a team that can definitely contend over the next 5 years, right? Jalen Williams, 24, Chet, 23, SGA, 26. You got guys like Hardenstein are only like 26. You know what I'm saying? The majority of their rosters, young. I think Lou Dort's 26, 27 too. Like young, athletic, hungry. I think they're a team whose identity and culture is one that they're going to come back prepared, ready to go and try again next year. Like there's just so many good things to say about the Thunder, man. I'm excited to see what they do. I'm excited to see if they make any moves too, or if they stay put. Because you got stuff starting to happen in the free agency, and this is a big year with a lot of changes. Do they make any changes, or do they just stay put? I said before the series wrapped up in my last podcast that I thought out of the Pacers and the Thunder, the team that won probably was going to stay put. And I still believe they most likely will, just because the price tags on a lot of difference makers is going to be very high. And when you already won a championship, you don't want to overpay for somebody. You know what I'm saying? We just won the championship. Why do we need to overpay for something? So I'm skeptical on if they will make any big changes, but I wouldn't put it past them. Sam Presti's a heck of a GM. I wouldn't put it past them to at least do some digging, see what they can find, see who might be available, and see what happens, what comes of it. But outside of that, man, in terms of the more what happened on the court throughout this series, what I thought about the games being played, the more analytical side of things, I wanted to touch on that really quickly before moving on. And I thought going into the series that OKC was the more talented team. I think a lot of people thought that way. I picked OKC to win the series, right? I thought they were going to win it in 6 games. But with that being said, going into Game 7, I'd be lying to you if I didn't think the Pacers had the advantage. And it was very tough for me to say OKC was going to win that game. Though I know, they've responded well previously when they've, had lapses and bad games where they've gotten, run off the court like they did in Game 6, etc. But I thought Game 6 was a little bit different, and let me tell you why. Game 6 was it showed a lack of maturity, right? I felt like Game 6 for the Oklahoma City Thunder showed a lack of maturity because Game 7s are unpredictable. Nothing is promised in a Game 7. We've seen that throughout the history of the NBA. Anything could happen. One guy could get hot, even though you're the favorite. If one guy gets hot on the opposing team, that can ruin your playoff hopes, your championships hopes, etc. And I thought the energy that Oklahoma City came out with, that they sustained over the course of 48 minutes, was not of championship caliber, right? And I think that that's a very fair statement to say. So when I saw that, I thought, okay, now going into a Game 7, who's going to have more confidence going into Game 7? I don't care whose home court it's on because the Pacers have already proven that they can win on Oklahoma City's court. They did it Game 1 of this series. I said it undoubtedly has to be the Pacers, right? The Pacers have won already on their home court. They just beat these guys by like 20, closer to 30 when the star players were actually playing, right? They let their foot off the gas. And, they're going into a Game 7. They shot the ball well. They got high morale. I don't care what Oklahoma City's crowd is like, right? I don't think it's going to make up for that. And honestly, I really was close to shifting my pick. Now, ultimately, I didn't want to be one of those guys who just flip-flops at the first sign of distress. So I said, I'm going to ride it out with OKC, see what happens. But with that being said, I did my gut was telling me that Indiana was going to win that game. And who knows, right? I know a lot of us say, you get hurt, it is what it is. You got to play the hand that you're dealt. But who knows what would happen if Tyrese Haliburton stayed on that court for the, remaining 40 minutes of the game or what have you. And it's unfortunate to see because it would have been nice to see either one of those teams win at their full capacity. But we've been seeing this throughout the playoffs, right? Like the best players on team, whether it's the Warriors, the Celtics, the Milwaukee Bucks, get hurt. And just you gotta play the hands that you're dealt as the opposing team, and that's what ended up happening. So, but I wanted to just stress that heading into that game, I did think that the Pacers had the upper hand, and I thought the Pacers were going to get it done. And they fought their butts off, man. They played really well. TJ McConnell was going crazy, and buckets. I did think the officiating was odd at times. I thought TJ McConnell was clearly getting fouled on drives to the basket, especially in that third quarter. And then you'd go on to the other end and just see guys like getting these touch fouls. I didn't think the officiating was great. and listen, I don't got no horse in the race. You know what I'm saying? Whether it's the Thunder, whether it's the Pacers, my team got knocked out in the first round. So it kind of was what it was for me. But I will say it would have. I will say it would have been. I don't even want to say it would have been cool to see the Pacers win because I think either team, this did a lot for their franchise. So I don't think one team it was better for them winning over the other. Now, what I do want to transition to is I do think the Pacers window was shorter than the Oklahoma City Thunders, clearly, right? Like they got guys like Miles Turner, free agent this summer. What's he going to do? You got guys like, Benedict Mathurin. What is he going to do? And that has only been expedited now by Tyrese Haliburton's injury because Tyrese Halliburton is now going to miss the entirety of the 2025-2026 season. And when he comes back, now you have a Pascal Siakam who I think is going to be 34, 33 or 34 at that time. You have, Miles Turner, if they sign him back, he's going to be like 32. McConnell going to be like 33, right? Your team has just gotten older. You don't know what's going to happen with some of those huge pieces like Mathurin, like Neesmith, you know what I'm saying, like Nembhard. And now you go from a team who realistically was probably going to be the favorite to come out of the East again next season, even if they lost in the finals, but Tyrese Haliburton stayed healthy. They probably would have been a favorite to come out of the East again next season to a team that, will probably make the playoffs, but it's not going to be the same as this year. You know what I'm saying? It's definitely not going to be the same as this year. So what's unfortunate to me, man, is that, and this could have very well been Tyrese Haliburton's choice or what have you. I'm sure that he didn't want to not play, game 6 and game 7 of the NBA playoffs. But from a franchise perspective, you go from having a window that's 2, 3, 4 years long to a window that's essentially just shut in one game. And because, again, if there's one game that you want to risk it all for, I get it being game 7 of the NBA Finals. But this is why these Achilles injuries and these calf strains are so important to really, really be cautious with. Because, again, there's no guarantee that you win game 7 either way. You know what I'm saying? There's no guarantee whether Tyrese plays or not. There's no guarantee, like we just saw. Even if he makes it through the 48 minutes, though, you can still lose that game. But now you put, at risk his future and your entire franchise future because he's your franchise guy. And now over the next 2-3 seasons, who knows? Now, this isn't to say that the Pacers are going to be a bad team next year or anything like that, right? I think they'll keep their same general makeup and they'll be okay. The system that they play is going to work, right? The distribution, the chemistry that they have, they're going to be okay in terms of like still being a competitive team. But man, you made it to the Eastern Conference Finals last year. You made it to the finals this year. You see the way the East is just so open. I think it may have been a better choice to sit Tyrese, right? Because all we've seen with calf strains over the past 3, 4, 5 years is Achilles tears. Calf strain, try to play through it, Achilles tear, right? The guys who don't get injured are the ones who take adequate time to let that calf recover before coming back. You got to think about it, right? From, like a muscular perspective. If your muscle is not able to do its job, you're putting that much more tension onto a tendon that already absorbs so much pressure on movements. When you're talking about taking a back step, cutting, ripping through, right? There's so much pressure from an elite athlete putting onto that tendon and that calf that if that muscle is even slightly tempered with or non-functioning or not up to where it needs to be, that pressure or that impact that would normally be absorbed by the calf goes right into the tendon, right? And that's when you see these Achilles tears happen. You know what I'm saying? It's just a byproduct of not being the calf not responding properly, therefore the pressure and the tension goes down into the Achilles, before you know it. It just is what it is. So I think, hopefully, I'm hoping that moving forward, we're going to start to see a lot more reservation with calf strains, because I think there's enough evidence out now to be like, all right, is the juice worth the squeeze, right? Even if you win it, you're talking about shortening guys' careers. And if not by the teams, if not by the franchises, hopefully by the players. I know you want to play game sevens. Trust me, if I was in that same position as a competitor when I was playing, I would have wanted to play as well. I would have probably tried to play through it. But when you think about it in terms of what's better for your health, for your career, for your family, for your team, I'm not sure you playing is what's best for that, because your team losing the following year isn't of benefit to anybody either, right? You're talking about shortening people's careers in that way, because losing teams, guys get traded, things get blown up, you know, contract uncertainty starts to happen, right? So it's not always the best thing to play, right? And if you look at it from multiple fronts, there's a lot of things to consider. So I'm hoping for these players' sakes that we've seen enough of this 3-1 playoffs between Damian Lillard first, Jason Tatum second, and now Tyrese Haliburton, that they will just choose to recover properly and take these calf strains more seriously. I wouldn't be opposed to like calf strains being like a mandatory 4 week off. You know what I'm saying? Obviously, you got to assess the severity of it. Maybe get an MRI or what have you, see what the severity of the muscle strain is. But there definitely needs to be more reservation. Definitely needs to be more reservation, because when you're talking about a muscle that leads into such a big and important tendon, you just don't want to see that continue to happen, right? I'd say the same thing for like a quad or hamstring tear, right? That's going to lead into your quad tendon, right? We saw with Victor Oladipo how debilitating that injury can be. So when you're talking about these big tendons that can really uh, in, inhibit the way that you play and your future moving forward, even if recovery's gotten so much better, right? Like our bodies still are biologically the same, and it's still going to take 9 months to recover. And even if that Achilles makes a full recovery and a full, it pairs completely right, and there's nothing the matter with it, there's something to be said for taking 9 months to a year away from your sport. And I think that's largely what ends up impacting guys now with how good medicine is, even more so than the surgery sometimes, because surgery has gotten to a point where they're able most of the time, don't want to say all the time, to do such a good job that that tendon is going to be strong, it's going to be healthy, it's going to function the way that it did. But that doesn't speak to the deconditioning that happens over the course of a year when you're not able to compete and prepare at an all NBA level. You know what I'm saying? That's what we got to think about. When your body becomes deconditioned, it's very, very hard to get that back, right? That doesn't come back overnight. Now, Tyrese is young. You know what I'm saying? He'll do his thing. He'll get back. I'm confident that him, Tatum, those guys will get back to where they were and still play at a high level. But I think just moving forward, having more reservation when it comes to these injuries. Kendrick Perkins, a guy who I don't love most of his takes, but he said it before Game 6, I believe. He said, if that calf is giving you problems, I just wouldn't do it. And you never want to have that sort of thought process going into a game, or that cloud over you when you're playing. But I think there's a reality that just comes along with it at this point. How often that we're seeing it, and how hard it is on guys to recover from. Like if you think just 15 years ago, Achilles injuries were like a kiss of death almost. You know what I'm saying? It was so hard to come back from those things. It was just like a cloud over the rest of your career if you got one. I can remember Chauncey Billups getting one later in his career, and he's one guy who I remember coming back and playing pretty well still. Never the same, but he was also aging at the time, right? So it was a little bit different. But for the most part, right, it just felt like guys couldn't come back the same. Again, technology's getting better, surgeries are getting better, all these things are getting better, but that doesn't change biology, right? You still have to go through the process and allow your body time to heal, allow that tendon to, wherever it attaches back to, that where it's sewed at to kind of reconstitute and buckle down and that scar tissue to scar down and everything to tighten up, and you get your range of motion back once everything tightens up. It's a long process, man. It's a long process. And again, I think it's more so the deconditioning that your body does after the injury by not being able to train at that elite level than the injury itself nowadays. I do think that there's some truth to that. But with that said, man, like I said, we just gotta be more cautious. Be more cautious. Players, franchises alike. Again, I think these guys sometimes can be their own worst enemy. So surrounding yourself with good people in your corner, not even your own worst enemy. I think that sounds bad. That has kind of a negative connotation to it. But what I'm saying is, right, we love to compete. This is what we've done since we were kids. These guys are playing at the highest level. They're the best players in the world. They're going to want to try and play through things. Their legacy is on the line in these games. Their money's on the line in these games. The way that they're perceived by their peers, all this sort of stuff is on the line, and they want to make sure that they come ready to compete, and they can really put a stamp on these series. So I don't blame them for wanting to play, but I'm hoping that franchises will start to look at things differently. Coaching staffs, support staff, like the people, athletic trainers, all that sort of stuff, will really start to look at these things a little bit more cautiously and not try to give these guys pain meds and say get out there. You know what I'm saying? That's my ultimate hope. But wishing all the best to Tyrese Haliburton, man. I'm confident that he'll make a full recovery. The type of athlete that he is, a guy who's not super explosive in the way he plays the game, I think will bode well for him. He kind of has a similar build to Kevin Durant, almost, just as a point guard, right? Not obviously not as tall, but very slender, very long. And the reason I bring that up is because if we're talking about the gold standard for Achilles recovery, it has to be Kevin Durant, right? He dang well played better basketball post Achilles tear than he did beforehand. You know what I'm saying? Those Brooklyn series, those runs in the playoffs when, James Harden, Kyrie Irving were getting hurt, just looking tremendous, like the best player on the planet. There was like a 2-year span between, LeBron not being the best player in the world, Giannis transitioning into the best player of the world, where it was like, is it KD? Dang, that boy is doing something special right now. And unfortunately, we never got to see the what that Brooklyn team could ultimately do in the playoffs when fully healthy. But he was something different. So I say all that to say, I think Halliburton, similar build to KD, obviously not as tall, not as long, all those sorts of things, not quite as extreme, but long, slender, not super explosive, but a good athlete, a long athlete. I think he could use that as inspiration and come back and be as good as he's ever been, because he's a tremendous player, tremendous point guard, one of the best point guards in the NBA. Deserves all the credit that he's gotten over the playoffs. Proved doubters wrong, and man, maybe the clutchest player in the NBA over the past 2 years. I know Jalen Brunson, one clutch player in the NBA, and he's tremendous in the clutch. Don't get me wrong, but I don't know if there's been a player to hit more big shots than Tyrese Haliburton over the last 2 years. And we're talking about tough, late game shots, not just big shots, but like tough ones, contested threes, step backs, fadeaways. Just seems like every key moment he finds a way to make a play. He's an exceptional player, man. So wishing him a full recovery. While we're at it, Damian Lillard, Jason Tatum, you guys as well. Damian Lillard is one of my favorite players, one of my favorite point guards, especially of the last 10, 15 years of his career. Been fun to watch. I remember watching Damian Lillard in the Great Alaska Shootout in Alaska. I'm born and raised in Alaska. That was the first time I saw him while he was at Weber State, and then I got to see him again as he transitioned to the NBA in the Summer League. In Vegas, he was just killing dudes in the Summer League. You knew he was going to be a bad boy. And then Jason Tatum, there's not enough good things I could say about that guy, but potential to be one of the best Celtics of all time. And I think he's another guy who's going to come back and make a full recovery and compete at a high level again, get back to all NBA form, and really be that dude. So, wishing those guys the best in their recovery journey. But moving on, want to talk about the KD trade. Kevin Durant got traded to the Houston Rockets yesterday. It was all over his boardroom platform. He was in an interview, and he was informed during the interview while he was on stage talking to a reporter that he got traded to the Houston Rockets and the Phoenix Suns in return got Dillon Brooks, Jalen Green, 5 second-round picks, and their number 10 pick in this year's draft. So this year, the Phoenix Suns will have the 10th pick. So to be honest with you, I think good trade for both teams. I don't think anybody got fleeced. I don't think you can say anybody, got a bad end of the stick. I thought this trade was very good for both teams. My initial thoughts are that, and you guys, you guys tell me if I'm wrong, or tell me if I'm crazy, because I don't hear too many people talking about this. But personally, I think the Phoenix Suns stand to make a bigger jump next season and be better next season from where they were than the Houston Rockets. And let me tell you what I mean. Houston Rockets won 54 games this season. They were the second seed in the West. I don't think much is going to change for them in terms of a seeding standpoint. Where I think their difference is going to happen most is when they get into the playoffs, having a guy who's a solidified scorer who can get shots for them when they need it, consistent offense, is going to make a big difference for them. For example, if they had Kevin Durant this year in the playoffs, the Warriors are not beating them. And I don't even think that series goes 7, to be honest with you. I think the Rockets probably get them out of there in like 5, maybe 6 games, if I'm being 100% honest with you. I think that's the difference. I think KD is the difference in that regard. Now, do they win the West? I don't know. We still got to see how things mesh, right? We tend to overlook how much chemistry matters in the NBA. It's not always talent that matters most, but chemistry goes a very long way. We just saw this last year. We thought Phoenix was a pretty talented team. They had been in the playoffs the past couple of years, and this year that talent didn't seem to mean much. It seems like their chemistry was off, their lineups were a little bit off, and they just couldn't figure things out. And you could see that in the results. They really struggled as a team this season. So we have to wait and see with the Rockets. But what I will say is they got a really good core. They got guys who are extremely good vets. Fred VanVleet, Steven Adams still on the roster. They signed him to a 3-year deal. They got some young pieces still around there in Sengun and Thompson, who are amazing. Plus guys like Jabari off the bench, right? They got a really good roster, a really good balance between young and old guys that I think is going to bode well for them this season. I will be interested to see how they continue to develop those young guys, because when you add a guy like KD, it does add shots. Now, obviously, you take those shots away from Dillon Brooks, you take those shots away from Jalen Green, you give them to KD, but like still, there's guys like who are still developing, who are young on that team, and it'll be interesting to see how they continue to develop. But my first thoughts are that this is a good trade for both teams. I think both teams won out on this trade. I think both teams got what they needed. I think it makes Houston, I don't want to say an instant contender, because when you're the second seed, you should be a contender. But I think it makes them a more legitimate contender, if that makes sense. I think it makes them more legitimate and more real of a threat as you get into the playoffs and start to play against these really high-level teams. Now, I do think, again, I want to reiterate, I think this trade does more in terms of the regular season for the Phoenix Suns. I personally think the Phoenix Suns, if they're able to flip Bradley Beal's contract into a center, it doesn't have to be the greatest center in the world, but some sort of center, and maybe some good bench pieces like a point guard, or a bench point guard. I think the Suns could be back in the playoff race this year. They were pretty clearly out of it by the end of the season. They had, took their foot off the gas. They won like 35, 36 games, I think. I think I wouldn't be surprised next year if we saw Devin Booker. Let me rephrase that. I wouldn't be surprised next year if Devin Booker next year got back to all NBA form. I think that's a bet I'm willing to put out there, that I think Devin Booker had he still averaged like 25, and largely just because they didn't win. But I think his leadership, his intangibles pick back up, and he gets back to playing at an all NBA caliber. And I'd go as far to say that he does make an all NBA team next year. I think Jalen Green with Devin Booker will be a good fit, because now he is not the first option on offense, especially from the perimeter, right? On the Rockets, he was their first offensive option a lot of times, right? Especially as a perimeter scorer. Now he's going to very clearly be that second option. It gives him some grace. It gives him some time to develop more. I think you got two combo guards there that are really good and really dynamic. I think you could play them alongside each other. You get a backup point guard. I think you'll be fine. If you want to try and flip Jalen into something else, you can. But honestly, he's a young guy. You need some youth on that Suns team. I think right now you go through kind of a soft rebuild where you get to keep your guy, your franchise guy, in Devin Booker, but you also get to get some young talent around him. So my primary focus if I was the Phoenix Suns would be try and get off that Bradley Beal contract, but try and flip it for a center. Again, I don't think you're going to get anything great for him because he has that no trade clause and he's making like $50 million a year. But there may be a bad team willing to take him. Maybe the Wizards want to take him back. You know what I'm saying? They still got roster space to or they still got cap space to absorb, and maybe they're willing to give one of their bench, one or two of their bench guys up or something like that. You know what I'm saying? Just throwing it out there. I don't think that's the perfect fit, but you get what I'm saying, right? You get what I'm going for. So I think if they can flip Bradley Beal into a big and maybe a backup point guard, doesn't have to be the best players in the world. Just has to be guys who are who will buy in and who will play hard and who can do some things, have some talent, but they don't got to be all stars or what I'm saying. You don't got to try and match contracts. Is my point. You don't have to try and find contracts that are players who are making the same type of money as Brad Beal is, right? Like try to get some decent pieces, but just do what you can. And I think that'll go a long way in helping rebalance and reset that Phoenix team. And I think that's a team who could get back to, if it all goes well, I think the Phoenix Suns could get back to 45 wins next season. I think with Jalen Green, Devin Booker, getting back to form, playing really well, you got an athletic backcourt in those two. You get a good bench point guard, you get a good solid big, and then you just run it and see how that goes. I think you could do some things with that. I definitely think you could do some things with that. And I didn't even mention Dillon Brooks. I didn't even mention Dillon Brooks, but that's a great piece to have as your three man, right? He's a culture guy, right? If there's one guy he reminds me of, like Patrick Beverley when Patrick Beverley went to Minnesota. You know what I'm saying? He helped turn those guys back into a playoff team. You know what I'm saying? As much as you may scoff at his abilities on the court, I don't think you can negate what he does to a team. Patrick Beverley or Dillon Brooks. You know what I'm saying? Those guys are special and important players to have on your roster. And I could see him really helping shift that culture back to the team that it was like 3 years ago, the team that was contending for finals appearances and, deep playoff runs. That's a team I think they could get back to just with some minor adjustments. We forget how good Devin Booker is, but that's a bad boy. It's a bad boy, right? Like, I don't know if Anthony Edwards is better than Devin Booker. That's the type of player that Devin is, right? Like, he's exceptional. You know what I'm saying? And I think he just has to get back to his winning ways, and he can really start to show people who he is again. And I think he will do that this coming year, as long as they're able to put a few more pieces around that team and make it a pretty good squad, a pretty decent squad. So that's my thought on that trade. I think both teams won out, to be honest with you. I think it was good for both teams. I'm excited about it. And again, that's another one. We saw Bane get moved. Now we've seen KD get moved. It's going to start trickling in, right? It's going to start happening. I'll be interested to see if anything else happens before the draft, because I know the draft is coming up. Maybe it seems like Milwaukee's going to try and, I think Giannis is a guy you could tell just his personality. He does not want to leave Milwaukee. He reminds me a lot of Damian Lillard, to be honest with you, in that, there was like 3 years before Damian Lillard left Portland where people started to talk about, I think he should leave. They're just not going to do enough, And every summer it was the same questions asking him in news. He said, I want to be in Portland. And eventually it got to a point where they traded him, but I think it was just too little too late, if I'm being completely honest with you. So I would hate to see Giannis hang out in Milwaukee and never contend for a championship again. I think that's an injustice to his career. But I also get you building something someplace, you spending your time someplace, you having loyalty, you loving someplace, and also you being such a competitor that you think that you can win anywhere. You know what I'm saying? I get that. And we like that out of athletes. You know what I'm saying? We like that out of guys like Giannis. So I don't think he should get, you know, I don't think he should get knocked. Dame got knocked a little bit for not wanting to leave Portland. And, we've kind of seen how that's played, injury aside, right? But we've seen how that's played out. And I think there's probably part of him who wishes that he would have stayed in Portland, and just rode it out with them. And I don't want that same thing to happen to Giannis as well. So if he does get traded, I hope it's to a good team, a team that's ready to contend for a title now. My preference just on paper would be the Spurs, but I also understand wanting to stay out in the East and keeping things a little bit more balanced. But man, just him and Wemby as a front court just sounds ludicrous to me. I would love to see that. I would love to see that. There was a point where there was a few talks of the Milwaukee Bucks trading for Anthony Davis when Anthony Davis was getting in those trade rumors back 2019, 2020. And in my head, I was like, damn, could you imagine Giannis and Anthony Davis at your front court? Now, imagine Giannis. This is just from a defense perspective, because offensively, like as a team, I would argue that Anthony Davis and Giannis would probably be better than than Giannis and Wemby, at least with where Wemby's at right now. But defensively, though, my goodness, like I don't know if we would see a better defense than what those two would do defensively. Like that might be one of the best defenses of all time. It just sounds crazy on paper to me. I would love to see it. I would absolutely love to see it. But yeah, I don't got too much I want to talk about anymore. I think we got through the important stuff. Again, more things are going to start to funnel through. More things are going to start to happen, and it's just going to be like a snowball effect. Once one thing happens, another, and it's just going to really build and build and build. And I think by the time July rolls around, first, second week of July, we're going to see some big moves being made, some exciting moves being played. There's a lot of teams who are competitive, a lot of teams who need to make moves. Are the Warriors going to make some more moves? Because I think they need to, right? I think they need to get a big. The Lakers got to make some moves. What moves are the Lakers going to make? Are they just waiting around for free agency to open up? I don't know, but I'm excited for it. The NBA always has something going on. It's a lot of fun. I'm excited to see, what happens during the draft. Are there moves being made for some of these higher picks come draft night? We shall see. But man, it was a fun NBA season. It was a really fun NBA season. It was a season full of parity, full of competition, very deep talent pool. You know what I'm saying? Like when you're talking about the West, there was like 10, 11 legitimate teams, something like that. East, some wacky stuff going on with teams like Philly, but in general, you got a team like Detroit really coming through the funnel, making a huge leap, going from 14 wins to like 45, 46 wins. My goodness, it was a fun NBA season, and I'm excited to see what next season brings, because I think it's going to be more of that. I think there's going to be a lot more of that happening in the near future, with just how balanced the NBA is right now and how much competition there is. So I'm excited. I'm excited for it, guys. As always, if you like the content, make sure to like, subscribe. Oh, wait a second. There's actually something I wanted to talk about. So I know this is a basketball channel, talk a lot about basketball, but one sport that I got into coming out of college in about 2018, 2019, in that range was MMA, right? Got done with college, watched a little bit more MMA. My brother was getting into it at the time. Started getting into it, started watching it. I've been a pretty decent fan of MMA over the past 6-7 years, I'd say, right? And I wanted to drop some nuggets right here, just some thoughts right here, just to give a different look, see what people think, and just give my thoughts on the state of MMA, the UFC right now as we're seeing it. Yeah, so just be a couple, like 2-3 minutes of that, because if you follow MMA at all, MMA is in kind of a, I don't want to say dark spot, bad spot. No, that's not the right word for it, but it just seems like it's in a very weird spot. MMA does right now, UFC especially, where the fights aren't as interesting. It feels very repetitive. The media isn't great at the moment. The fighters don't seem to draw you in quite as much as they used to. There's not as much, mystique around these guys. There's not as much buildup around these guys. There's just, it's just weird. And for me personally, what I've noticed is that the MMA is tough. It's different than basketball, right? With basketball, you have a team. I grew up being a Lakers fan. I will always be a Lakers fan, most likely, unless something absurd happened. I don't know what would get me to be not stop being a Lakers fan. But you have these teams and you root for these teams and you love these teams. You love the players on these teams. You want your team to do good. MMA is weird because you're fans of fighters, but the window at which you can be a fan of a fighter is so short. It's so short. You know what I'm saying? Like a fighter may have a 10-year career, but it may only be 2 or 3 years where they're fighting at a elite level. You know what I'm saying? Fighting at a level where you're gonna tune in for the fights, the pay-per-views, the big nights, the big names, all that sort of stuff. Especially as a casual fan. And when these fighters start to lose, it's just like heartbreaking. You know what I'm saying? And then you got these new guys coming up through the funnel, but it's just it feels like you're constantly having to find a new person to like, a new person to like, a new person to watch, a new person to follow, a new person to learn, and all this sort of stuff. And it just becomes repetitive or something. I don't know what it is, but it's been very weird. It's been very weird as I've been thinking about my, MMA UFC fandom, because for a while there, between, the pandemic, when that was the only sport on, I was watching like every event. You know what I'm saying? I was watching the pay-per-views, the fight nights, the Contender Series stuff. And it's just very interesting to me how quickly over the past year I've become disinterested in a lot of the stuff that they're putting out. To be honest with you, very, very disinterested. Um, and I think a lot of it has to do with like all the great fighters that I came up watching essentially are all being phased out of the sport at the same time. Now, sure, you got guys like Alexander Volkanovski who just got a win. Kamaru Usman just got a win. But these guys were champions for so long and all within the same span. And then over the course of like a year, it felt like a couple months, UFC moves fast, fighting moves fast. So of course of a couple months, it's like these guys lost. Now these guys are washed up. Everybody's telling you, and and then eventually it's just you're supposed to like the next person up. You're supposed to respect. I mean, you should always show respect, but you're supposed to like just be in awe of the next person up. And it happens so fast. It's tough to really. You have to be willing to just like change from one to one to one to one to one so fast. It's just a weird concept. It's a weird concept. And maybe because I'm a basketball guy, I grew up in basketball, that I'm just not as used to it. And I noticed that like all the MMA media, they're essentially just detached from the decisions and stuff. So they're fans, but not really fans. You know what I'm saying? Like they enjoy the sport, but like guys like Luke Thomas, Ariel Helwani, like they're not tied to the results like a normal fan was. Like a normal fan cares about who won and lost, and they may care slightly, but they don't really show it in the media. That's for sure. Whether they do or not behind closed doors, who knows? But so they tell you like, oh, you should really love this guy and you should really do this, and they deserve all of this praise and whatnot. And that's not to say that they don't, but it's like you spend all this time committing to your fandom to one person or to a few guys, and overnight it feels like things just change, and then you're just expected to go and start to go all in for somebody else. It's a weird sport to be a fan of. That's I'm kind of rambling a little bit, but it's a weird sport to be a fan of, and I've just found it hard to continue to watch at the same level that I did. So still watching the pay-per-views. I'll watch the pay-per-view coming up this weekend between Ilya Taporia and Charles Oliveira. But like even Taporia, people keep telling me that he's like supposed to be the biggest star in MMA, and we gotta be excited about him. And don't get me wrong, he's a tremendous fighter with a lot of talent, but I'm just like not as interested. I don't know why. I'm just not as interested for whatever reason. So you guys tell me if I'm wrong. Tell me if I'm crazy, but it just doesn't have the same appeal. It feels like the turnover is just so fast. It's tough to keep track of who the champion is, why I should be watching this guy, you know what I'm saying, or why they deserve like for you to just automatically become a fan of them as soon as they become the champ, or be interested in them because they become the champ. I think that's the biggest thing. I think, like this big wave of champions came up right when I started watching, between Israel Adesanya, Kamaru Usman. You had Francis coming in. You had Volkanovski. That's right around the time that he came in. Him and Max were still going, battling tit for tat, and now it's just like all those guys are essentially out of there. Even though, again, Volk just won, got his belt back and stuff. But it's just, you get what I'm saying, right? It's just like these new phases come in, and then it's just like you're just expected to move on to the next thing. Just happens quick, man. It happens quick. It's interesting. It's very interesting. But last point on that, and one thing I did want to touch on, one of the reasons I wanted to touch on MMA today, just as a random side note, is because I felt compelled to say, for as much complaining as MMA fans do, it's about, let me rephrase, for as much complaining as MMA UFC fans do in regards to the UFC as a company, it's amazing to me how much slack a guy like Jon Jones gets when he retires, for not fighting Tom Aspinall beforehand. I got to be honest with you guys. It feels like, when I was coming in as a fan and watching it, most people in the media and stuff were for the fighters. And, I'm definitely a guy, as a fan who's for the fighters. I want those guys to make as much money as they can, maximize their earning potential, have a good career, and all this sort of stuff. But what I've noticed is anytime a fighter actually gets leverage in the UFC and they don't use that leverage in a way that you deem fit, you immediately turn on them. Now, I'm not here to praise or stand on what Jon Jones' decisions are. I really don't care. But what I will say is, he's one of the few people who have been able to gain the upper hand on the UFC. And he chose not to fight. And from my understanding, based on what's being reported by guys like Ariel Helwani, he made it very clear a while ago, months ago, that he did not want to fight again. He wanted to retire. His plans were not to fight again. And the UFC, the same way they did with Khabib, when Khabib told them, now, be honest, Khabib came out and said it in the media that he was retiring. But maybe they told Johns not to do that behind closed doors. I don't know how that happened. But my point is, they knew for months. They knew for months what his plans were. And they chose to try and continue to make that fight happen, knowing that he was 1 foot in, 1 foot out, that he wanted to retire. So to me, blaming Jon Jones for this fight not happening is just odd, especially when I look at it from a realistic perspective. One, I personally am quite confident that Jon Jones is not in his prime anymore. I think that's a fair assessment to say based on him not fighting frequently. The fights that we have seen, even though he has done well and won them, doesn't feel as dominating, as imposing, as athletic, moving the same as he once did. There is no part of me that wants to see Jon Jones not in his prime go out there and fight if he's not going to fight to the best of his ability, especially, and if he doesn't want to, right? There's no part of me that wants to see that, but for some reason, he's a loser. His legacy is tainted because he chose not to take this fight. Now, sure, he could have came out immediately and said, I'm retiring, and this would have been a non-issue. But I got to be honest with you guys. I think people would have complained just as much, maybe not for as long, because, they would have already had a new fight lined up. And if that's the complaint, so be it. But that's not the complaint. That's not the only complaint. Because guys like Luke Thomas and Ariel Helwani were complaining the weeks and months leading into Jon Jones versus Stipe, right? About John's being 1 foot in, 1 foot out about the Tom Aspinall fight. They were hammering home this point the weeks after he had just fought, right? Like with no ability to like give him time to breathe. You know what I'm saying? It was pretty much since he got hurt and they knew that this fight with Stipe was still going to happen. It's been this whole time. You got to fight Aspinall. You got to fight Aspinall. You got to fight Aspinall. I got to be honest with you guys. I would be annoyed by now too. I may just do it just to be petty and like not appease these people who are in the media who are being extremely annoying. It's weird to me because these guys are normally for the fighters, for them having as much leverage as they want to, and what have you. And it's like the UFC at any point could have said, Tom, let's go in a different direction. John is wasting our time. Tom Aspinall at any point could have been like, I don't want to wait for this dude. Get me a fight. Everybody has to take responsibility is my point. You guys make it seem like these other people aren't grown-ups making their own decisions. And it's just weird to me. It's weird to me that we want fighters to have leverage so bad until they actually get leverage. And then once they do, we want to, hammer them to the end of the world, you know what I'm saying, about the decisions that they make. If Jon Jones doesn't want to fight, I don't want to see him fight. I don't think in his next fight we're going to get the best Jon Jones ever. So to me, it's like, I think we've seen the best Jon has had to offer, and that's okay, right? He's had a long career. He's had a great, prestigious career. Could he have handled this situation better? Yes. So could have Tom. So could have the UFC. Tom could have been at any point, give me Volkov, give me Gang, give me Gon. You know what I'm saying? Give me Curtis Blades again for the trilogy. Yeah, and I know you guys are going to say, he wants the undisputed. He wants the undisputed. I'll tell you what. No one is going to stop me from making money, from providing for my family and setting myself up. So if they're on some BS over there, do what you do. But I would have went and defended the interim title if I knew I was going to make 1.5, 2 million, whatever that was. That he'll probably make as a championship of the heavyweight division. So that's not to say it was the right thing that Jon Jones should have, not just came out into the media and said that. He should have, but also the UFC 3, 4, 5, 6 months ago could have been like, we're moving on. Tom Aspinall 3, 4, 5, 6 months ago could have been like, we're moving on. Right? But instead, they're trying to, leave out every bit of hope. Who cares? Go fight if that's what you want to do, right? Go fight. Go do what you said you want to do, and that's become, the undisputed championship. Make yourself undeniable or whatever, and then let them strip Jon Jones. Let them strip him and become the champion. I don't know. It's just weird to me. To be honest with you, there's all the tainting that it could have been done to Jon's legacy is not from this, right? It's from the drug stuff. It's from the the run-ins with the law, right? Like this, to me personally, doesn't meaningfully change his legacy. To me, he's one of the greatest fighters ever. It's not going to change because he didn't fight one guy. And I kind of agree with him, right? Like, I think people forget who Ciryl Gane was before they fought, right? Yes, he lost to Francis Ngannou, but Ciryl Gane, especially like before the Francis Ngannou fight, was supposed to be what Tom Aspinall is seen as now. You know what I'm saying? Him and Tom were supposed to be those dudes, So my point being, he walked through Ciryl Gane, and immediately no one took that win serious. Immediately. Gets no credit for that win. Ciryl Gane, regardless of what his ground game is still one of the most talented heavyweight fighters on the roster in the world. You know what I'm saying? I'm not so sure that if Ciryl Gane and Tom Aspinall match up, that Cyril's not going to beat him. I think that's going to be an extremely competitive fight. One, because I don't think Tom Aspinall is going to be able to capitalize on the ground game the way Jon Jones did. You know what I'm saying? Sure, he probably has a better ground game than Ciryl, but can he get it there, right? Can he control Ciryl? You know what I'm saying? Cyril's athletic. He's bouncy. He moves around a lot. I haven't seen Aspinall show the same level of ground game that Jon Jones has. That's an interesting fight. Cyril's very light on his feet. He cuts angles well. He's not just a big puncher, right? He's a smart, strategic fighter on the feet, right? And Tom Aspinall has been so explosive that he hasn't had to be as strategic. So it's a fight that's very interesting to me. And I don't know. And then again, right, like if he loses to Ciryl, then all this stuff is it's just weird. It's just weird to me. But let me know what your guys' thoughts are. This was a different segment that I just wanted to touch on really quick because it was just bugging me the way that they've been, the media especially and the people who I watch the most are Luke Thomas and I'll give Brian Campbell a shout in there, and then Ariel Helwani, obviously. And it just seems like to me personally, they've just missed the mark this whole time. And Ariel's a guy who I think it's fair to say can show a little bias at times and be a fan of guys, and I think that's really shown itself here in this one for sure. But not a bad thing, right? We're all fans at the end of the day, but just interesting to me. I just think that it hasn't been all what it was. But again, I'm also not watching every episode anymore. Every show. There was a while where Monday, Wednesday, I was on that thing watching the Ariel Helwani show, and I'm not watching as much anymore. So he very well could have changed the tune, but it felt like, at least for a long time, that it was just all finger pointing at Jon, and it just seemed weird to me. So, anyways, guys, I'll wrap it up there. Wish you guys the best. I appreciate the support. Make sure to like, comment. Remember to tell a friend to tell a friend. Leave a comment. Leave a question. Let me know what you're thinking. Let me know why I'm wrong. Let me know what I'm tripping. About the MMA stuff as well. Let me know if I just am completely off the mark. But I'll be posting, every week like I always do. So if you have any questions, let me know. Looking forward to chatting soon. Peace.